Well, welcome. Isn't it great that God has given us the gifts to help people in need? People that are emotionally overwhelmed, their life's just falling apart, they're stuck in a fog, yet we can come alongside them. I had that situation in the hospital many times with patients who are just completely overwhelmed. But be able to help somebody move from a difficult place and a confused place and back to a place of calm is just a great gift. Well, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at solution-focused brief therapy with a focus on the first step, identifying a solvable complaint. That's where we want to be at. The agenda for what we're going to go through today, first the introduction, then we're going to spend some time watching a 4-minute video so that you can experientially see what happens. We've all experienced emotion ourselves and seen it in other people, and perhaps we've helped people through it. I know in counseling situations, everyone here has. Then we're going to break it down to kind of increase the level of thought. We're going to break it down into its individual parts. Following that, we'll synthesize it, bring it back together through a fishbowl or role play exercise where you'll get to experience actually trying to help a client get into that spot where they can recognize what that complaint it is and share it with you as the counselor. And then finally, we'll summarize. Look at this. This is our learning outcome. As you read through that, notice the main focus is to assess and to estimate. Assess means you're watching a client and you're estimating or you're assessing that level of emotional overwhelm, and then you're estimating that decrease back to rational thought. So that's the focus and what we'll be after today. So first we're going to watch a video, about 4 minutes, so that you will be able to look at, understand, comprehend what a counselor goes through. As you watch this video, I'd like you to write down observations. One, about the client. What kind of emotional overwhelm do you see? How would you kind of scale that from 1 to 10? And then aspects that the counselor takes on. What techniques does the counselor use? All right.
No problem at all. Clear instructions. So here I am.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Terry, I was just wondering if you could tell me a bit about what it is that's brought you in today.
Well, a feeling of discomfort within the job that I'm doing at the moment. About 3 months ago, I answered a job advertisement that looked like it was going to be something that I would really enjoy doing. And here we are 3 months down the track, and as time's gone on, it's just felt less and less comfortable, and I felt like, well, I don't know whether I've got the right job, I don't know whether it's the right place for me to be. I mean, the place itself's okay, you know, the people are great, I really like being there. I really like the people, you know, and I don't mind being, you know, the atmosphere is really good, that they're very supportive. And the work I can do, it's not a problem with the work, but it's something I just feel uncomfortable, really, really uncomfortable. I just thought, I can't do this anymore. Can't really put my finger on what it is, why it is.
Okay. And I'm wondering why today, Terry, is the right time that you've decided, well, you know, after 3 months, I need to do something about it, and that day is today.
Yeah, because last Friday I felt like running out of the place screaming, absolutely screaming. It just seemed that there was a lot of demands being made on me in a very short time, and it just got to me, and I thought, I can't do this. But it was crazy because I can do it. But again, there's this confusion. Am I in the right place? Am I doing something that I really want to do, or is there something else? And I just got tired of it. And I thought, if I don't get out, if I don't do something, if I don't go and talk to somebody, then I don't know what might happen. But I found myself being right on the edge.
Okay. So Terry, I'd just like to ask you a bit of a different question, if I can. It's going to need to have a bit of imagination on your part. So would that be all right, just to change tack slightly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want you to use your imagination, and I want you to imagine, if you can, that tonight, when you go to sleep, a miracle happens. And when you wake up in the morning, all of your problems are solved.
Wow.
And I'm just wondering how you would know that all of your problems are solved. What things would be different? What would have changed?
Oh, that'd be great. I would feel different because I knew that I wouldn't be going to the job that I've been going to for the past 3 months. That's the first thing. So there'd be that relief of pressure or feeling uncomfortable. I would be living in somewhere else that would be cooler, not where I am now. Someplace definitely cooler. With my wife in this place as well, this new place, and doing something completely different, something that I would enjoy doing. And well, they're the immediate things. That's what comes to mind immediately. As you say it, I would feel good. I would feel much more relaxed.
Yeah.
And much more at peace with myself and probably everybody else, including my wife.
Okay, yeah. And Terry, you mentioned doing something different to the job that you're doing now. Do you have any ideas about what sort of thing you might be doing instead?
Okay, and we're going to stop it there. So what did you think? What, for the level of emotion in the client, not something huge, but where would you put that if 1 was completely rational, 10 was off the charts, emotional overwhelm? Where would you put that client as you looked at him?
Certainly above 5.
Okay. Why do you say that, Tom?
Because he said that he was he wanted to run out of the place immediately.
Okay.
So that sounds like a situation where he's really distressed and he's as close to his wit's end. Now that puts it further at the 10 side, but he's not completely there because he's still in control. He understands that he needs to find some kind of source of writing.
Yeah, so that was something you noticed.
Yeah.
Anyone else notice anything else about him?
I mean, definitely seemed very rational and logical in his explanation, and kind of led her to believe it was, it started at this point where it was okay, and then over time it's gotten worse. Like Tom mentioned, until it's escalated to, I just want to run out of there. So it's escalated some. It's a little higher level now, it seems.
Yeah. So what techniques did the counselor use to kind of help him at the beginning? And remember, this is just the start of the session.
She did a lot of active listening.
Okay.
After we started, she was really good at acknowledging what he was saying.
All right, active listening. What pieces of active listening?
Well, she repeated back what she thought he said.
Okay.
And so that says that you're on the right understanding level, or there's some small part of that that you missed. The fact that the people and the work are good, and yet the demands are higher than he can withstand, seem to be in conflict.
All right. Victoria, any thoughts on that? A technique that the counselor used that was effective?
No, I feel like she was, he was speaking very quickly. His speech was very rapid and anxious, and she was speaking a little bit more calmly, kind of not matching him in that anxiety where he was, but sort of calmly repeating, reflecting what he was saying in a way that was slightly lower in the anxiety scale.
So it seems like this wasn't uncommon. This is something that you've seen before, you recognize either from a counseling session or maybe even dealing with a family member or talking with a friend, recognizing that escalation and some movement toward more rational thought, talking through sentences and figuring something out. Let's move on to breaking this down now. And what this does is just changes the level of our cognitive thinking as counselors of understanding these things. So first of all, we're going to look at the solvable problem, what it is about the problem, what's in the way. Then what do we need to know about it? Then we'll look at the solution, what clear thinking looks like, and finally we'll look at how you do that. What's your methodology as a counselor to get from point A to point B? So first of all, and take about 20 seconds or so to think about this question. What's standing in the way of the client being able to tell the counselor what the problem is. Just think about that and write down a thought that would prompt an answer. Okay. So what is it? What's standing in the way? Not a long explanation, but as you think about that, what is it that's in the way of getting to that problem?
In a word, I think it's stress.
Ah.
He
Okay.
says the demands are causing him, demands of the job are causing him to wish to escape, to
Mhm.
feel for the exit door.
Makes sense.
And so there's something in there, in that process that, where are the demands coming from? If he
Mhm.
likes the work, if he likes the people, where are the demands coming
Yeah.
from? And he can do the job.
Sure.
It's not a competency issue.
So what else? Anybody can you build on that stress, or in any situation, any client? What stands in the way of that client being able to
I
share?
think his emotional involvement in it. He's not
Ah.
able to get past his feelings to think clearly for rational
Okay.
answer.
Running into a wall,
Mhm.
so to speak.
I just
Yeah,
said,
makes sense.
he can't see a way out or forward yet, so he's kind of, stuck.
Okay.
And, or maybe it's the stress or whatever's clouding his ability to move through it.
Yeah, so keep in mind as you're thinking through a session that this is what you as the counselor are looking for. You're looking for some wall, some sticking point that's not allowing that person. That then guides what interventions that you would use. So now let's go a little further outside of what's standing in the way, which is the problem, or let's get into identifying the problem in this case, which was just identified as emotional overwhelm. So what do we know, again, deeper thinking, what do we know about the mind of a person when they're in emotional overwhelm? Again, just take a few seconds, 10, 15 seconds, kind of dwell on that, write something down. What do you know about the mind of a person, a client that's in emotional overwhelm? Okay. What do you think? Just generally, what happens in the mind of a person who is in emotional overwhelm? Any thoughts?
I really think that everything's escalated. Everything seems a lot bigger
Okay.
than what it really is.
Yeah,
And you really have to
exaggerate.
step back out of it in order to see the big picture. But when you're in the middle of it, everything's just really overwhelming and you can't really put the whole pieces together and you can't see what the issue is and what you need to do different.
Okay. Yeah, it kind of sounds like being on a ship in a storm out on the deck, and things are just wild around you and hard to focus. Anybody else?
Logical thinking seems to be affected, at least in this individual, by stress. So if they've got a lot of stress, then they're not able to put logical steps or see a solution path.
Okay. All right. Can't really get that. It's that confusion, that fog, that storm, if you will. How does it feel for you? Have you ever been emotionally overwhelmed? What does that look like or feel like?
Exhausting.
Ah, nice, exhausting. Yeah, that's a good point. Think of looking at a client and seeing that exhausted, and what does that look like? What nonverbal cues do you see in that instance? Yeah, our mind, that part of our mind, what's that part of our mind called, the emotional part? Ah, limbic system. Remember? The limbic system, yeah. That's where the overwhelm occurs. All the focus and brain power is going toward the limbic system, and it's the blood and energy is taken away from what part of the brain?
The logical
Yeah, the logic center, the prefrontal cortex, yeah. So the person's kind of stuck in that storm in the limbic system, in the midst of it. So yeah, that's what emotions look like, and everybody can pick out those facial features, those nonverbal cues of an emotionally overwhelmed person. So, when the solution, if the emotional overwhelm is point A, point B, the solution is rational thought, right? So think about this for a minute. What are the visible characteristics of a client who is thinking clearly? And just talk with your partner this time for about 30 seconds. Share this. Just talk it out. Don't even need to write anything down. If someone has returned to rational thought, what does that look like?
Right. And the level, the stress level is gone down, so he's calmer, he's able to think through logical thoughts and step-by-step patterns.
Okay, we got one team done. So just either one of you, what would you come up with?
Okay, I think is, the reduction in stress brings the level of conversation, even the voice level
Okay.
down a bit. And they're able to start thinking logically, start thinking step by step. You know, what are the incremental parts of this that bother them or that they can influence to find a solution.
So as you're listening to them, now you're hearing coherent themes and in thoughts, step by step. Yeah.
Exactly.
And Victoria.
You almost saw relief when she was talking about the miracle question. And then he's like, I can do something about this. You know, when he started talking about all the things that it would look like when she asked him that question.
Okay. A release of pressure
Right.
coming off.
Mhm.
Yeah, emotions just have that tenseness to them. They build up pressure and kind of fog our brains. What do you think?
Off of that one, he was able, based on that question, to kind of identify the two core issues that were going on that were preventing him from reaching that end goal. So he was able to lock eyes with the end goal of where he wanted to be. And so he then immediately started smiling, he started relaxing and saying, okay, what is it that's actually preventing me from reaching those goals of getting out of the situation?
Yeah. So interesting. We've got the problem, which is the obstacle, which is that emotional overwhelm, and we know what the overwhelm looks like. All those nonverbal cues that you get from that, from watching and listening, also the verbal cues that you get from the client. And we know what point B looks like, the logical part, coming to more rational or cognitive thought. Because would you agree you can see that happening when you watch a client? So if you put that together, what's that methodology? You know, in solution-focused brief therapy, there's a co-construction of the solution. And sometimes there's a co-construction of the problem. You're helping the client identify what the problem is. So how do you help a client from moving from being emotionally overwhelmed to a rational state? How do you help carry them through that? Tom, you just can't wait to answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, I see this as not feeding the monkey.
Okay.
It's, if he's at a heightened level, bringing the level down just reduces that stress level in him. And forcing that by a miracle question causes him to think, one, logically, and of a calmer and more thoughtful approach to resolution of the problem.
Okay.
And then finally, it's within his own capability to identify something that's going to resolve his problem. By his own construct, it would be something that he could live with and he's got buy-in on.
Yeah. Would anybody add anything else to that? As Tom talked through that methodology.
I mean, I think it's just allowing him to look further out beyond the problem and, have hope that, there is something that's going to get better.
Yeah.
So it's breathing some hope into the situation as well.
Isn't it great that you're able to bring that hope just by calming that person down? Part of the first step, the first stage of solution-focused brief therapy is just that, is helping the client find a solvable complaint. And as you calm them down to be able to do that, it actually creates what? Hope. It does. What a great step to be able to take. So we've kind of broken that down, which is analyzing it. So then to synthesize the problem, to bring it back together and to experience it, we're going to move on to that good old fishbowl role play, which I know you're so excited about, where you have that opportunity to really experience it. So what we're going to do is, Kenneth and Elizabeth, why don't you bring your chairs right up here. This is the fishbowl, and face each other in your chairs. Okay, and they're the first dyad. Kenneth is going to be the counselor, and Elizabeth is the counselee. This is dyad number 2, and what you're going to be focusing on when you watch them, and kind of writing it down, and feel free to discuss it as you're going along, is you're looking at what's being done, what the counselor is using. Is there miracle questions? Is there exception questions? Different types of active listening? Is there scaling? Things like that he uses to assess that. And then dyad 3 over here, you're going to be observing and trying to figure out, is there a movement, a change in the client's emotional state, going up or down? And is that measurable? And how can you measure that? Or how do you see that? Perhaps in her face or body language. All right? And then we'll brief just kind of the highlights of those as soon as we're done. All right, so let's begin. You have about 3.5 minutes. Go ahead, counselor.
Elizabeth, why don't you tell me what's brought you here today?
Well, so I've been married for a few years now, and it worked out really well when we first got married because my husband and I were both working. Then a couple years into marriage, we had our first child, and then since then I've continued working full time, and my husband ended up losing his job. Has really lost any ambition or desire to be seeking out work, and is constantly just at home or wanting to play video games or just leaving everything for me to do. Not just like financially, but like I'm taking care of 3 kids. I'm trying to make sure that they're having rides to everywhere, and I'm working all the time to try to make all the money to bring in funds. And I feel like everything's just getting behind. The bills are not getting paid, so I'm having to look for extra things. Meanwhile, if I try to talk to my husband about it, he's just not receptive and just gets angry and just walks away, thinking I'm guilting him out for not having a job. But in reality, like, he needs to man up and be like the leader of the home, but instead I'm like the leader of everything. So it's irritating that I want to be loving, but I don't know how to do that well and take care of my kids too.
So, I hear 2 problems coming from you, and just let me know if I'm hearing this right, but I'm hearing one, that maybe you are feeling a bit of disappointment that you are taking on a role that you don't believe is yours in your household, having to be the only one carrying the job and being the breadwinner of the family, while also taking care of the kids. You have so much responsibility on your shoulders. And then maybe 2, that you don't feel your concerns being heard, that you've gone to your husband, talking to him about these things, and that he's not reciprocated any desire to change or to further himself in any way to get a job. Am I hearing those things correctly?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's just, I want to do what I can to take care of my kids, and I want to be working hard. Like, I have no problem with working, but I don't feel like I should be the only one doing anything.
Okay, we'll end on that note. One thing from the counselor, what's one observation maybe that was difficult or something that you saw?
There was definitely a lot of emotion coming from her that I recognized she's way up here, and having to bring her down into a way in which we can talk logically about what is going on and how we can come to some sort of resolution. Definitely,
Okay.
she's way up here.
Counsel Lee, was it helpful, the conversation with him?
Yeah, I think that he was asking questions to pinpoint kind of what the issues were, even if I had not been able to verbalize them, pinpointing like two problems. Also kind of helping me realize like, have I been effective in trying to help? What is my role here? And kind of having me process and think a little bit more with those open or closed-ended questions.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. All right, so what do we think over here, technique-wise? What did you see?
Tom and I were kind of both, where you mentioned to me, just your body language was good, you were very focused, leaning in, forward, really listening well. You said you used the I hear, so you were kind of talking back as far as, what's the right term for that? And you were
Restate the problem.
Restating the problem, so,
Rephrasing.
she would feel like you really were listening. And even the tone of your voice, I thought was really good in terms of de-escalation. Yeah, so I thought that was good, and good job on, explaining what was going on, I thought as well.
Yeah, the restating of the problem obviously is one that, a matter of communication. He's done a good job of listening, and there weren't elements in the conversation that he missed and that he needed to recorrect. Later on in that conversation set, he looked for possible solutions to what might, what's been done to solve the issue, what things are in play that caused distress.
Yeah, and notice that he was assessing what was going on and responding to her in ways that he could tell whether it worked or not. And he was utilizing those techniques to then watch her get calmer and think what that was as we thought about the cognitive and emotional differences. You want to increase the cognitive, get the person to think, ask questions, which pulls kind of the juice away from the emotional side, allows them to become more rational in thought and calmer. So what did you see? What did you see reflected on changes of emotions?
Yeah, so we both noticed that when she started, it was almost like, I have to explain this, like this exhaustion of having to explain the situation. But then as she was explaining, her hands are wringing and her feet are kicking, and you can see the very clear signs of that heightened emotion. But what we thought was interesting is it's a very interesting case because the problem is like trying to even just identify the problem. What is her problem? Then the problem is with the husband. So where do you work? Moving forward from there, where do you work in that scenario when the husband is you can't change the other person in the scenario? So
Yeah, but remember, it's in the moment, reducing that overwhelm and creating hope. Critical to the counselor is watching what's going on, noticing, as Ken said at first, wow, I just saw this escalated emotion. Okay, how can I help this person bring that down? And as he went through those steps. All right, thank you guys. Bring your chairs back over here. And next week when we gather, we'll go through a couple more of those so that everybody has time to really feel what that's like instead of just observing it. So take a minute now, and a literal minute, as we close things up and summarize the progress or process that we just went through. Assessing and estimating are kind of those two learning outcomes that we desired. So as you think about this last about 30 minutes, write down any key insights that you have, any new learning, any deeper learning that you hadn't thought of before? What's maybe the one big thing that you're taking away? Or maybe any pros and cons of the lesson that you liked or didn't like? We'll kind of get 1 point from each person. And we'll start over with Victoria and work our way this way. What's kind of that one big takeaway for you?
That although you can't solve the problem, it's your, I suppose, responsibility to help the client focus on that hope. Be able to see that beyond what their current thinking is. You're the one that can see more clearly.
Okay, yeah, great point. You're the one that's in the clear, so you can bring them at least in that direction of hope, or where they at least can realize there is hope out there. Yeah, that's great. Linda.
In assessing the client's emotional level, one of the things that stuck out to me was the voice volume and bringing that client down by speaking softly and trying to decompress them before you get to the specifics on what you're working on.
Yeah, tonality. It means a lot. It's a huge part of communication. One of those things that the counselor ear should hear, and what that carries. Tom, what do you think?
I think one of the keys is to take the stress out of the client by calming the level of the rhetoric, or level of the stress level.
So reducing that emotional frenzy in order to bring a level of calmness. Now are you saying you can recognize that, of calmness?
Calmness slows down the voice level, slows down the rabbit chasing, and focuses on identifying the real source of the problem.
Okay, yeah, great way to put it. It's an indicator of being able to focus on that real problem. Therese, what do you think?
Might be similar to him, but I like when you were talking about if you're increasing the cognitive, it reduces the emotional. It's similar, and just allows them to be more logical. So just taking that, shifting them away from the heightened emotion makes such a difference for their clear thinking.
Yeah. Engaging the thinking brain calms down the limbic system, emotional brain.